My GF disappeared into thin air the day before I was about to propose to her for marriage, and no one knows where she has been for the past 2 years. I, 28M, never believed in ghost stories or urban legends, but for the past 2 years I've been living in one. It all started on what should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, it became the beginning of a nightmare that I can't seem to wake up from. 2 years ago, I was ready to propose to my girlfriend, 26F of 3 years. We had met in college, bonded over our shared love for obscure indie bands and spicy food, and had been inseparable ever since. She was my best friend, my confidant, and the person I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. I had it all planned out. A romantic dinner at the rooftop restaurant where we had our first date, followed by a walk in the park where we'd shared our first kiss. The ring was burning a hole in my pocket, and my heart was racing with anticipation. But she never showed up for dinner. At first, I thought she was just running late. Traffic in the city can be unpredictable, after all. I called her cell, but it went straight to voicemail. As the minutes ticked by, my excitement turned to worry, then to full-blown panic. I called her friends, her coworkers, even her parents. Nobody had seen or heard from her since that morning when she left for work. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The next 48 hours were a blur of police reports, frantic searches, and sleepless nights. Her car was found in the parking lot of her office building, exactly where she always left it. Security footage showed her arriving at work that morning, but there was no footage of her leaving. It was as if she had simply ceased to exist sometime between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the investigation hit one dead end after another. There were no signs of foul play, no evidence of her leaving town, no activity on her bank accounts or social media. It was as if she had been erased from the world, leaving behind only memories and unanswered questions. The police eventually classified it as a missing person case, but without any new leads, the investigation stalled. I couldn't accept that. I refused to believe that someone could just disappear without a trace in this day and age. I became obsessed with finding her. I quit my job as a software engineer and dedicated every waking moment to the search. I created websites, plastered the city with missing person posters, and reached out to every media outlet that would listen. I hired private investigators, consulted psychics, even though I didn't believe in that stuff, and even explored some, let's say, less than legal avenues of investigation. My friends and family tried to be supportive at first, but as time went on, their concern turned to pity and then to frustration. They told me I needed to move on, to accept that she was gone. But how could I? How could I give up on the person I loved most in the world? "You are throwing your life away," my best friend told me one night, after I'd missed his wedding because I was following up on yet another false lead. "She wouldn't want this for you." But he didn't understand. None of them did. How could I move on when I didn't know what had happened? How could I find closure when there were still so many unanswered questions? The not knowing was the worst part. Was she alive? Was she hurt? Was she being held against her will somewhere? Or had something more sinister happened? The possibilities haunted my dreams and consumed my waking thoughts. I became a regular at the local police station, checking in weekly for updates. The detective assigned to the case, a gruff but kind-hearted man in his 50s, eventually became something of a reluctant friend. "Look, kid," he told me one day, his voice gentle but firm. "I've been doing this job for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like this. People don't just vanish without a trace. There's always something. A clue, a body, a witness. But in this case, it's like she never existed." His words should have discouraged me, but they only fueled my determination. If this was unprecedented, then the answer had to be out there somewhere. I just had to find it. I started digging deeper into her past, looking for anything that might explain her disappearance. I interviewed her old classmates, tracked down distant relatives, even flew to her hometown to speak with her childhood friends. But every lead turned into another dead end. As the first anniversary of her disappearance approached, I felt myself spiraling. I had lost weight, barely slept, and had pushed away almost everyone in my life. The ring I had never gotten to give her sat in my bedside drawer, a constant reminder of what I had lost. It was around this time that I started seeing her everywhere. A glimpse of familiar blonde hair in a crowded street, the echo of her laugh in a busy coffee shop. I knew it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but part of me clung to these moments as if they were proof that she was still out there somewhere. One night, exactly a year after she vanished, I found myself standing on the bridge where we used to watch the sunset together. As I looked out over the water, a wave of exhaustion and despair washed over me. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider the possibility that I might never find out what happened to her. As I stood there, tears streaming down my face, an old man approached me. He had kind eyes and a weathered face that spoke of a life well lived. "Sometimes," he said, his voice gentle, "the hardest part of loving someone is learning to let them go." I wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't understand, but something in his eyes stopped me. Instead, I found myself pouring out the whole story to this stranger. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he placed a hand on my shoulder. "Your love for her is beautiful," he said, "but don't let it become a cage that traps you in the past. She would want you to live, to find happiness again." His words struck a chord in me. For the first time in a year, I felt a tiny spark of something that felt like hope. Not hope that I would find her, but hope that I could find a way to keep living without her. The next day, I made an appointment with a therapist. It wasn't easy, confronting the grief and anger I'd been suppressing for so long. But slowly, session by session, I began to heal. I started reconnecting with the friends and family I'd pushed away. I went back to work, throwing myself into coding projects that challenged and excited me. I even adopted a dog from the local shelter, a scruffy mutt that reminded me of the one we'd talked about getting together. But I didn't give up on finding her. I couldn't. Instead, I found a balance. I set aside time each week to follow up on leads and check in with the detective. But I also allowed myself to start living again. As the second year without her drew to a close, I received an unexpected call. It was from a woman in a small town about 200 miles away. She had seen one of the missing person posters I'd put up and thought she recognized my girlfriend. My heart raced as I drove to meet her. Could this finally be the break I'd been waiting for? The woman, a kindly, middle-aged librarian, showed me a library card application from 6 months ago. The photo wasn't great quality, but the resemblance was undeniable. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like I was close to answers. I spent the next week in that town, showing her picture around, following up on every possible lead. But once again, I hit a wall. The librarian remembered her coming in a few times over the course of a month, then never seeing her again. No one else in town recognized her. As I drove back home, my emotions were a confusing mix of disappointment and hope. I hadn't found her, but this was the first real evidence that she was still out there somewhere. It was something to hold on to. Back home, I threw myself back into the search with renewed vigor. I expanded my online outreach, connecting with missing persons networks across the country. I started a podcast documenting the search, hoping that sharing her story might jog someone's memory or reach her if she was out there listening. But as weeks turned into months with no further leads, I found myself at a crossroads. The spark of hope that had been reignited was starting to fade, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. I realized that I couldn't keep living in this limbo forever, waiting for answers that might never come. It was my therapist who finally helped me see things clearly. "You have two choices," she said during one of our sessions. "You can continue to let this consume you, or you can choose to honor her memory by living the life you two dreamed of having together." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I realized that in my desperate search for answers, I had been neglecting the very things that had made our relationship so special: our shared dreams, our plans for the future, our love of life and adventure. That night, I took out the engagement ring for the first time in 2 years. As I held it, I made a decision. I would never stop looking for her, never stop hoping for answers. But I would also start living again, really living, not just going through the motions. I enrolled in a coding boot camp to update my skills. I started volunteering at the local animal shelter. I even went on a few dates, although it felt strange and a bit guilty at first. Slowly but surely, I began to feel like myself again. Now, 2 years to the day since she vanished, I'm sitting in our favorite coffee shop writing this. The barista just brought me her usual order, a vanilla latte with an extra shot, along with my black coffee. It's a small ritual I've maintained, a way of keeping her memory alive. I don't know if I'll ever find out what happened to her. The not knowing still hurts, but it's a dull ache now, not the sharp pain it once was. I've learned to live with the uncertainty, to find joy in the present while still honoring the past. As I sit here, watching the world go by outside the window, I can almost hear her voice. "Live," she seems to say. "Live for both of us." And so that's what I'm trying to do. living, loving, and never forgetting. Because somewhere out there, she's still missing. And somewhere out there, there are answers. I may not find them today or tomorrow, or even in this lifetime, but I'll never stop looking. And in the meantime, I'll live the life we dreamed of, carrying her memory with me always. If you're out there, my love, know that you're still missed, still loved, and never, ever forgotten.